The front door was open, and a wedding photo lay face down on the hallway table when Maya pushed the key and stepped inside. Suspicion coiled under her ribs before she finished setting her bag down. The house smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner she used, and that cleaner could not have turned the photograph over by itself. She moved through the narrow entry with a slow, practical balance, fingers already finding the flashlight in the drawer. The central problem was clear within seconds. Someone had been in her house uninvited, and she needed to know whether that someone was an apology or a threat. She called Ethan while she scanned the living room. "Ethan, the door is open," she said, voice low. "Someone's been here. Stay where you are." "Don't touch anything," Ethan answered. His voice was steady. He said her name like an anchor. "I'm coming over." Maya left the table lamp on and walked the hallway with the flashlight beam cutting rectangles across framed grocery lists and school drawings. She introduced herself to the space with small acts, checking the kitchen cabinets, peeking into her son Mateo's room, lifting the corner of the couch cushion. Because her hands needed work or else the suspicion would not into panic. She is 34, a single mother who teaches pottery one night a week and manages a small bookkeeping job during the day. The divorce paperwork was still in the top drawer, where she kept receipts. The presence of that paper felt like a map to what had gone wrong. Ethan arrived within 10 minutes, shoes soft on the entry mat. He moved without rush, the practiced steadiness she had learned to rely on since the split. "Show me," he said. Her name again, Maya, but in a tone that stayed outside her chest instead of pushing in. He checked the rooms with her, same sweep, methodical. He opened windows, felt latches, checked the backyard gate. When he found the window latch with a fresh scratch, he tapped it with his knuckle and frowned. "That wasn't like this before, Ethan." He kept his sentences short and offered a practical hand. He lifted boxes to reveal scuffed floorboards. He crouched to view shoe tracks by the back door. He did not say the things that would shame or minimize her fear. He checked and repeated facts. His calm changed something in Maya. Suspicion loosened into wariness. That shift moved her to act. She photographed the turned, over wedding picture and the scratch and sent the files to herself and to Ethan. A knock sounded at the porch while they were in the kitchen. Maya froze with the phone in her hand. Ethan glanced at her and mouthed, "Don't open." Mark's apology arrived on the porch as a knock and a voice. "Maya, can we talk?" he said before she opened the door. He used a practiced softness that had once convinced her to sign papers and to accept explanations. Mark stood framed by the porch light, collar turned down, blazer neat. He looked contrite enough to be believable from the street. The conflict sharpened instantly. Mark's presence reopened old arguments about boundaries and control. Maya opened the door a crack. "Mark, don't come inside," she said. Her voice did not tremble. She used short sentences to keep control. "Not now. I only came to explain, Mark. I saw the door and I wanted to explain what." "Maya," she named the facts. The picture was on the floor. The window was open. "Someone was in my house." Mark's hands flexed. "Listen, I left in a hurry earlier. I came back and..." Ethan stepped forward and said, "We have footage coming from your doorbell. We should see it." It like a next step, not an accusation. His stance closed the entry, practical and unflashy. Maya felt anger briefly, a hot surge as she watched Mark's face. The anger was not loud, it was a precise tightening of the jaw that made words come quicker. That emotional shift, suspicion giving way to anger, pushed her to demand proof. They moved to the kitchen table and opened the laptop. Maya set the phone between the cups, its screen a small moon of light. The doorbell footage looped, a shadow at 9:13, a figure at 9:20, 7 ducking in behind Mark's stride. The clip showed Mark leaving earlier than he now claimed, and then another person entering after he'd already gone. Maya watched a second silhouette move past the doorway frame. The footage made a new threat visible and moved the emotion from anger to alarm. "Who is that?" "Maya." Her voice had narrowed. She felt fear move through her like a dropped stone. She swallowed and asked questions aloud, exact requests for times and names. Ethan paused the video and zoomed the frame until the figure's shoulders and coat were clear enough to notice height and gait. "We can enhance this, Ethan." "But someone else was here, Maya." Mark's face shifted. He tried to speak, then stopped. His practiced charm thinned into something ragged. "I swear I left," he said. "I only came back when I realized you left at 9 o'clock, Rosa from the doorway." She had come over because she'd seen headlights and the porch light. Rosa's voice was blunt and direct. She had lived next door for 12 years and never let niceties cover facts. "I saw you pacing outside at 9:15. You left again around 9:30 with your car lights down. Don't tell me you never went back out." Mark's shoulders tightened. Mark Rosa again, and the single word carried the warning a neighbor gives when they have had enough. Ethan's hand found Maya's forearm in a quick, steadying grip. That contact moved Maya from a whisper of fear into action. She dialed the police without hesitating and read the laptop timestamps aloud to the dispatcher. The arrival of a physical piece of evidence changed everything 5 minutes later. Someone had sent Maya an anonymous photo to her phone. A frozen image of her sleeping on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, the lamp casting a halo. The timestamp matched the video. The sender left no message. Her stomach fell in a way that made her knees ache. Fear shifted from the abstract to the immediate, because now someone had been inside while she slept. She pressed her thumb over the picture, as if she could press the threat back into the device. Maya pressed the phone to her chest and counted her breaths. She did not let herself narrate the fear with adjectives. She checked locks again and wrote down the exact times the footage showed movement. Each small, precise action calmed her by creating a sequence she could manage. That movement from panic into practical steps was an emotion shift in itself. The fear focused into determination. "Mark, did you ever see anyone else on the footage?" "Maya. She is named to pull him into accountability." Mark shook his head. "No, I swear to you, Maya." Ethan's jaw worked. "If you were here to talk, say what you need to say now in front of Rosa and me," he said. His voice was measured. "We were not letting this become a private conversation." Mark's reply came in a rush. "I didn't know." "I wasn't." "Maya, you have to believe me." He used short words. He tried to lean on them like a ladder. Rosa answered instead. "If you were worried, Mark, you didn't act like it. You paced out there. You came back in a different mood." The argument sharpened. Mark moved forward, as if to touch Maya's arm, and she pulled away. She felt the old rhythm of their fights, his quick gestures, her pause before answering. This time she would not be coaxed into a private reconciliation. The neighbor's presence and Ethan's posture closed the room into witnesses. "Don't touch me," Maya to Mark. The words were short. Mark's hand hovered and then fell. Ethan stepped closer and positioned himself between them. "Mark, leave now, Ethan." He used Mark's name and set a boundary with muscle rather than flourish. "Leave the property." Mark's face reddened. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Ethan. You rewrite, Ethan." "I don't." "But Maya does." Mark laughed once, a sound that wanted to make the situation lighter. "Maya, I'm trying to fix things. Then fix them somewhere else, Rosa." She had crossed to the porch railing and laid both palms flat on it, like a woman bracing for something heavy. The tension peaked when Mark reached out again and grabbed the edge of the screen to stop the footage from playing. His gesture was clumsy and angry. Ethan's hand moved up and caught Mark's wrist. Mark twisted, and his palm hit Ethan's forearm. The motion was quick. Ethan's balance kept him steady. Maya stepped forward to pull the laptop by its edge and stood between them with the table between Mark and her. The physical contact snapped the argument into a brief scuffle, a shove, an elbow, a grunt, then a harder push from Mark as he tried to force his way closer. Ethan shoved back with enough force to break Mark's momentum. "Get out, Ethan." He named him once and then pushed him to the porch steps. Mark stumbled, cursed, and left under the porch light. Rosa watched him cross the street and get into his car. The car pulled away with headlights cutting the dark until it was only a smear of red in the distance. After Mark left, Maya's breathing came in short, controlled lines. She pressed both hands flat on the table and let them rest there as if she could hold herself down. The immediate danger had passed, but the stakes felt higher because the evidence now pointed to someone watching her sleep. She slid the thin wedding band on her finger back and forth and then, with a steady movement, took it off and placed it on the table beside the laptop. That act closed a small, private loop of decision she had been circling for months, and it also changed the material facts, removing the last physical reminder of the marriage from her hand. The police arrived, took notes, and asked questions in clipped sentences. Rosa recounted her sighting. Ethan described the video times. Maya read the text messages aloud and turned the anonymous photo over to the officer. Their voices were short. They told exact facts instead of feelings. Each external event, a door left open, a neighbor's arrival, the anonymous photo, came every few paragraphs and pushed the plot forward. When the officers left with a promise to follow up, the porch felt both quieter and more watchful. Maya sat on the step with the ring on the table at her side. She felt exhaustion press into her shoulders. Ethan moved behind her and put a jacket across her knees, a small and practical covering that silently said he would stay. Maya bent her head and touched the photograph on the table, the picture of her Mark and Mateo on a beach, sunburned and laughing. She picked it up, turned it right side up, and set it face down again. She did this deliberately. It was a physical refusal to let the old image control the present. "You did the right thing, Ethan." He kept the sentence short and factual. He used her name twice in the exchange, Maya and then Maya, sit with me for a minute, and those repetitions tethered her to the room. She accepted the jacket and let the shoulders of it rest on her arms. Rosa stayed a while longer. She made them coffee in a paper cup she brought from her own kitchen and handed one to Maya. "If you need me, I'll be here, Rosa." She it plainly, with no flourish. Her reliable presence had been a form of protection for years. Now it made a practical difference because an extra pair of eyes meant someone would notice headlights or a shadow. They sat in a silence that was not empty. Ethan cleaned the table with the lemon cleaner, removed prints with small circles of tissue, and labeled the laptop's footage with the exact time stamps. He spoke in steps. "I'll put a motion sensor on the back gate. I'll call a locksmith in the morning." Each action was a plan rather than a promise, which steadied Maya more than words could. Maya made a decision then and there. She would file a formal complaint, sign for a restraining notice if possible, and not accept apologies delivered at her door. She notified her supervisor at work about potential patrols for Mateo during pickup hours. She called her sister to ask if Mateo could sleep over the next night. Those choices were small administrative acts that together formed a boundary. They were a refusal to be dismissed. Night stretched toward dawn while they sat on the porch. The sky moved from ink to a thin gray. Ethan stayed until the first bird sounded. At one point, Maya reached for her wedding band again, and then set it firmly on the table, not to pick it up. She did not make a speech about being reborn. She did not announce a plan of war. She took steps that would change her daily life, camera angles, locked latches, legal reports. Those were visible, practical consequences of the night's events. Before Ethan left, he crossed to the porch threshold and said, "I'll come by tomorrow and help secure the windows. I'll stay for Mateo's pickup if you want." Maya met his eyes. She "Thank you, Ethan." The words were short. He nodded. "Come by at 9 a.m. I'll be there." He did not promise to fix everything. He promised one action at a time. That steadiness shifted the mood from raw alarm to something like guarded relief. Maya felt that change not as a sudden uplift, but as the loosening of a muscle held taut for too long. When Ethan finally walked away down the sidewalk, Rosa watched him go and then closed Maya's gate herself. She called out, "Lock your windows before you sleep." Maya went inside and turned the deadbolts on every door. She placed the wedding band in a small paper envelope and slid it into the top drawer with the divorce papers. Then she sat at the kitchen table and opened the laptop to rewatch the footage once more, frame by frame. The silhouette's gate told her nothing new, but watching the time stamps and pausing at 9:20, 7 gave her a clearer sequence of who left and who returned. The act of cataloging the events made the night feel less like an assault and more like a case file she could build. She thought of Mateo asleep across town with his aunt and counted the minutes until she could call and check on him. She left the porch light on and moved the chair to face the window so she could see the path to the street. The practical changes she made, lighting the walkway, moving the chair, calling in the report, were not dramatic speeches, but they altered how she would live in the next days. Just before she turned off the kitchen light, she picked up the photograph again and placed it under the laptop. The final scene of the chapter is not a promise of healing, but a clear, concrete decision. She pulled the thin wedding band off her finger and put it inside the envelope on the top drawer, closed the drawer, and walked to the porch to sit with Ethan until the sky thinned toward dawn. The night had ended with a boundary set and a support accepted, and the last line of this chapter is the small, definite act of her hand leaving the ring on the table while Ethan kept watch at her side. Mark slammed an envelope down on the elementary school pick-up table and said, "I'm filing for temporary custody starting today." Suspicion braided through Maya's limbs the way cold water spreads across skin. She stepped forward and put her hand between her daughter and the papers. Ethan reached for her shoulder. His hand was steady. Parents stopped and watched. The problem was immediate and visible. A lawyer's motion, a demand to relocate their daughter, and Mark's calm insistence in front of witnesses. Maya's suspicion hardened into action. She folded her shoulders and said, "You can do this here, Mark." Her voice was flat, controlled. Mark looked at the other parents and smiled in the practiced way she learned to mistrust. "I'm entitled to petition, Mark. Temporary custody is the reasonable next step until we sort things out." He had the envelope sealed with a printed letterhead and tossed the legalese across the asphalt like a challenge. A mother behind them said, "This is public. What is he doing?" A father checked his phone and murmured. The principal appeared at the courtyard door and asked what was happening. Maya shielded their daughter with her body the way you would cover a small flame from wind. Her hands shook on the car seat latch while Ethan moved into the open between Mark and the stroller line. Ethan's voice carried a different rhythm. "Mark, this isn't the place. Leave her out of this now." He kept his tone low but clear. Maya watched Ethan's jaw set. His presence dialed down a few immediate threats. Parents relaxed their posture just enough to breathe. That shift, suspicion giving way to fear, and then to a brittle, guarded clarity, happened in the space of a minute. Ethan kept his shoulders loose and held Maya's gaze when she looked up. "Go to the office, Maya." "I'll talk to him." She didn't move. "No," she said. Not again. Her refusal was a small, precise event. She reached for the envelope without touching it, opened the flap, and read only the first paragraph. Mark watched and waited for her to betray herself by flinching. The first external event after the hook arrived in the form of a teacher stepping out with the school's shelter policy folder and asking Mark to leave if he had legal business. Mark's eyes flicked to the principal and then back to Maya. He smiled, this time with an edge. "I can do this anywhere. I'm not leaving here," as if saying it made it true. Maya's mind tightened around two things. The face-down wedding photo she found at home in the hallway when she returned from work last chapter, and the smell of lemon cleaner that morning on their doorknob. Both were concrete proofs that control had been rearranged in their house. She kept those details like small, useful tools. She put her daughter's small hand into hers and moved toward the parked car. Ethan followed and spoke to the principal in low, controlled sentences. Principal Hernandez, we object to any immediate custody change without counsel present. We'll be documenting this. Please note these events. Principal Hernandez nodded and said, I'll file a record. For now, we keep the child with the guardian on campus. Mark flared a look of annoyance. He then turned to the small crowd and said, I am only asking for what's best. If Mayor can handle care, temporary custody protects our child. His words were meant to seed doubt. Maya felt the old familiar tightness. Blood beating at her temple, eyes clenching. She wanted to answer with tears or a speech. Instead, she took out her phone and put it on record. Her hands were deliberate. Mark, you were going to lie here and now, and there are witnesses. She spoke plainly. She kept repeating the daughter's name when she addressed her, so the child remained an active person in the exchange, not an object to be fought over. The second external event came when a neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, no relation, remembered a weekend when Mark had left their daughter with a sitter without telling Maya. She walked up and told Principal Hernandez, last Saturday, Mark dropped her off and left at 9. Maya didn't he know, the crowd murmured. Mark's face tightened. He tried to redirect with a small laugh. That's not relevant, he said too quickly. Inside the car, Maya's eyes scanned the envelope again. The motion demanded temporary relocation and access to shared accounts. That clause felt like a lever. She tapped a note into her phone. Consult Rosa, call the lawyer, document messages. She spoke the list aloud, each item a small, concrete plan. Speaking made the fear convert into motion. Ethan stayed near the curb and intercepted a father who tried to step between him and Mark. Back off, Ethan simply. The father stepped back, reassured by Ethan's calm. Ethan's voice was a tool of containment, precise, low, steady. Conversations shifted into quick exchanges, Mayor, Mark, principal, parents, short lines that mapped who stood where. An external event arrived when Mark left briefly to make a phone call, and then returned with a man in a dark blazer who introduced himself as a family attorney. The attorney offered a business card and tried to set a formal tone in the schoolyard. We can proceed with temporary orders if necessary, he said. The card's weight in Mark's hand felt like an escalation. Maya rose to meet escalation with documentation. She called Rosa and said, Rosa, it's Mark, he's petitioning here. Can you get my files? Take the messages I gave you about his behavior. Rosa's reply was quick and practical. I'll get them and come to your house. Don't sign anything. Maya closed her phone and repeated the advice aloud to Ethan. Don't sign anything, she said. Her voice carried the authority born of prior mistakes. Mark moved closer and tried to speak to Maya in that intimate tone he used at home to undermine her decisions. Maya, this is for our daughter. It's not a battle. Maya's response was not an argument but a boundary. Don't call this concern when it's a takeover, Mark. Leave us alone at pick up. The brief exchange was sharp. It showed the crowd exactly what the center of their fight was. The next external event was small but public. A teacher texted Principal Hernandez a photo of Mark handing the envelope to a parent earlier, framing it as a community issue. The image traveled in the courtyard like quick ink. Mark's attempt to control the narrative fractured when a witness produced a text showing him bragging about playing it clever. Parents shifted eyes. Social pressure began to form around Maya instead of against her. That pressure led to a discovery. Ethan had taken time the week before to collect messages and a few short audio clips that recorded Mark's controlling suggestions about moving and accounts. Ethan pulled his phone from his satchel and handed the principal a compact folder of dated screenshots. These are messages where Mark proposed sudden moves and access shifts without consultation. Ethan. His fingers left fingerprints on the paper, factual marks that matched the timeline Maya had been assembling. Maya felt an emotion shift again, first suspicion, then fear, then a cautious relief when others supplied proof. She did not smile. She kept her posture stiff. Thank you, Ethan, she said, the words exact and not more. Ethan answered with a short, plain, "We're redoing what's right here, Mayor." Their exchange was a small lighthouse in a noisy sea. Mark's lawyer tried to argue that prior absence justified temporary custody. A brief, sharp argument erupted between the lawyer and Principal Hernandez. Mayor interrupted with one line, "Ask his clients, ask the sitter." She named facts instead of feelings. Parents watched the facts pile up. Mark's mouth tightened. He searched the crowd for allies. A mid-chapter mini cliffhanger occurred when a woman in the crowd shouted he tried to change her school schedule last month without telling Maya. The classroom doors closed for a moment as people turned. Mark's face lost color. Ethan stepped forward and said, "Who that?" The woman pointed at a neighbor who had a letter stamped from the school office dated 2 weeks earlier. The principal picked up the envelope and read aloud the stamped date. The crowd breathed in sharply. The balance of opinion shifted visibly in real time. Maya watched Mark's expression snap from practiced charm to urgent calculation. Mark left the courtyard that evening under the weight of a lot of small objections. He parked across the lot and watched them from his car window. Maya walked to her own car with her daughter, each step deliberate. She slid into the driver's seat and buckled the child's seatbelt herself. Her actions were precise and careful. That physical motion anchored the chapter's closing movement. They drove past the desert lane as the sun went down. Ethan came to the passenger window and whispered one sentence. "I'll be at the fundraiser tonight. If he pushes, I'll speak up." Maya nodded. She Ethan the simple legal steps she'd already begun: call the lawyer, file an objection, gather witness statements. They moved in a short, efficient rhythm of plans. The immediate threat had been checked, but the legal motion still landed on her kitchen table like a stone. At sunset in the school parking lot, Maya confronted Mark alone. Ethan stayed 3 cars away, visible but silent. Maya stepped out and stood with her phone in hand. "Mark," she said, "this ends today. No temporary move, no access to accounts. You want custody. File in court properly and we'll respond. But you will not take her away because you decided to." Mark raised his hands as if to show he was reasonable. "Maya, you're remaking this personal. I'm doing what's best for our daughter." His practiced warmth tried to fold around her. Their lines came fast and close like trading blows. "Don't call this concern when you mean control. Maya, don't act like charity when you mean command." Mark fired back with rapid phrases. "I provide stability. You overact. I am only doing what's necessary." The exchange included quick back and forths from both of them. 3 to 5 rapid lines that read like an interrogation. Ethan's presence changed the rhythm but did not interrupt. His eyes told Mark he had witnesses beyond the school's fences. Mark stalled. He did not expect Maya to show the principal's recorded notes, Ethan's folder of messages, and the neighbor's envelope all together. The visible evidence boxed him in. He stepped back and rubbed his jaw, tension visible in the way his fingers dug into skin. Maya did not celebrate. She did not raise her voice. "You step back now, Mark. We will handle this with counsel." He gave a brittle nod and turned to his car. An unexpected reveal surfaced at the last second. As Mark turned, Ethan called out, "Mark, why did you change the emergency contact on her file to a different number last month?" Mark stopped. His car keys hung between his fingers. He had to choose whether to answer. He murmured something about paperwork and hesitated. That pause suggested there was more. He had tried to move quietly. It changed how everyone understood his earlier actions. The climax of the chapter, Maya's confrontation in the parking lot, left Mark stepping back and offering a brittle truce. Ethan walked over, put one hand briefly on Maya's shoulder and said, "Call Rosa. I'll drop off copies to the principal and the fundraiser tonight." Maya keyed the car and buckled their daughter in. Nothing sentimental. She adjusted the child's blanket and started the engine. The headlights carved a clean beam across cracked asphalt. In the car, Maya and Ethan made a short list of next steps out loud. File an objection, get witness statements, schedule a consult with the lawyer, and keep records of pick-ups. Each item was an action, not a slogan. Their daughter kicked her feet softly in the back seat and hummed an off-key song. Maya listened to the hum and felt a quiet agency settle into her limbs. Not a dramatic rebirth, but a set of choices she could name. They drove away from the school into the low desert night. The chapter closed on a concrete action. Maya buckled her daughter, agreed with Ethan on the next legal step, and turned the key. The legal motion remained unresolved, but for now Mark had retreated. Maya kept the envelope in the front seat where she could touch it. She did not put it away. She put one hand over the small wedding band on her finger and held the steering wheel with the other. Headlights cut through dusk. The night contained work to do, and she had already started. A manila folder hit the mediation table so hard the coffee cup jumped. "Mark, I'm asking for expanded custody. Starting now." Suspicion tightened Maya's fingers around the paper she already held. Her first thought was the wedding photo she had found face down at home weeks earlier, the image of her and Mark set aside like proof of an old life. She leaned forward and set her own folder down on the table so the mediator could read the cover letter. The problem was concrete. Mark wanted more access to their daughter, and he had just introduced new paperwork without warning. Maya Alvarez kept her chin level. She did not let her voice go small. "Those are my records, Maya," and she slid school attendance logs and an email thread across the laminate. Her voice sounded flat to her, like a tool. The mediator, Rosa, adjusted her glasses and said, "Let's take each item one at a time." Maya felt a second shift in her chest. Suspicion had become a low, bright fear that made her palms sweat. She pushed that into motion. She would not let fear make her leave the table without answers. Rosa cleared her voice. "Mr. Spencer, can you explain why these forms were not included in your original filing?" Mark touched the folder as if it were a prop. "My attorney sent what matters. There are incidents to consider, overnight routines, missed pickups. I want what's safe for our daughter." Mark's tone was practiced. He named safety. He did not say responsibility. Maya heard the shape of his words and waited. "Ms. Alvarez, the mediator's role is to find common ground. Rosa, we will ask questions and note points of agreement or dispute." Maya nodded. She glanced at Ethan Cole in the back of the room. He had kept his distance through the first exchange, hands folded, an air of steady patience. Ethan's eyes met hers for a heartbeat. He only mouthed, "Keep it calm." That small movement shifted Maya from fear toward a guarded clarity. She would speak facts. She would not fold. The mediator read aloud the first sheet Mark had laid down. A counselor's note and a school incident report. "Ms. Patel says there was a missed pickup on May 14th. Rosa, tapping the report. Maya remembered May 14th. She had texted Mark at 4:50, 7 p.m. that day to say the bus was late. She had been at the clinic with her daughter for a sore throat and had documented every timestamp. She pushed the clinic receipt and the time-stamped messages into the pile and said, "I have a record of that pickup and the timestamps. The counselor's note omits the late bus and the phone calls I made." Her voice carried the small, controlled anger that had lived inside her since the divorce. Mark's lips thinned. "Your documentation doesn't change the fact there was a report. That matters." He looked at mediator Rosa and then at Ms. Patel, who sat in a crisp blouse at the room's edge. Ms. Patel straightened and said, "I wrote what was reported to me. If there are timestamps and logs, I can add them." The room shifted. An external event arrived. Mark's attorney produced a small envelope with a printed message and a counselor's shortened note that read more accusatory than factual. For a second the meeting felt procedural. Then the session snapped into something personal. Ethan left his seat and caught Maya as she rose to reach the box of extra forms. "Maya." Ethan quietly in the corridor as the mediation door swung shut behind them. "Let me look at the files." His voice was calm. "We should not let him choose the narrative by surprise." Maya studied Ethan's face. The faint laugh lines, the silver band at his right hand, the way he leaned in when he spoke. She weighed trust against pride. The second emotion shift landed, from suspicion into a tight, tethered reliance on Ethan's competence. "Ethan, I want to do this myself, Maya." She set her jaw. She had told herself she would not hand her case over to another person. Ethan nodded once and took one of her printed messages anyway, fingers steady. He read the header, then tapped the PDF with his thumb. "These print dates come from the server, not the phone. Ethan, there are metadata headers here." Maya didn't follow the technical detail in full, but the implication hit her like a gust. Someone could alter how the evidence looked on paper. She felt the fear tighten again. If an email could be changed, then the story Mark offered could be built around false edges. Back inside the room, mediator Rosa about overnight visits and schooling. "Mr. Spencer proposes unsupervised weekends starting next month," Rosa recited. Mark leaned forward. "Unsupervised time will prove I am responsible. Maya won't have to be scared to give me time." His words pulled at an old script, Mark framing himself as steady now, after months of distance. Maya pushed a folder forward. "Unsupervised weekends are not reasonable given the lack of established consistency." There were missed commitments before. She named dates. She used the attendance logs. She kept the sentences short so they would read clean in the mediator's notes. The exchange sharpened. "He left work late on the 10th, Mark." He looked at Maya and then at Ethan. "There were school notes about your reaction that day." Maya answered with specifics instead of feelings. "On the 10th I left at 2:45. I had the signed pickup from daycare. Mr. Spencer was the one 5 times late to the afternoon pickup last month." Her statements were concrete, each one a small pin on a bulletin board of truth. Rosa nodded and scribbled. Mark's lawyer produced another page, a counselor's annotation that suggested a missed pickup and parental instability. Ms. Patel read aloud a line that carried an assumption. There was a pattern reported. Mark used the word pattern like a slow hammer. Maya's mouth went dry. She watched his fingers curl around the document. She felt a physical reaction. Her jaw tightened, her shoulders rose. Fear pushed against her ribs and wanted to speak first. Instead, she leaned on the clarity she had forced into place earlier and asked, "Can I see the original file? Was it emailed? Who printed it?" Her question moved the room. That external action, asking for provenance, forced attention away from narrative and onto evidence. A minor surprise arrived. Ms. Patel admitted she had received a printout, not the original digital file. "They handed me a sheet at the meeting. I wrote what I had in front of me." Her voice held the exact strain of a woman who liked to be accurate. That admission shifted the momentum. Mark's attorney bristled. "The note is valid. It was provided by school staff." Maya's pulse pounded. She and Ethan exchanged a look across the table. Ethan mouthed, "Check timestamps." He had been quiet for most of the session. Now he took an active step. Ethan crouched beside the table as if to examine a child's toy. He tapped the printed message photograph and pointed at the bottom corner. "This print shows a creation date of June 2nd at 3:03 p.m. But the file's metadata reports a 2:30 am save. Someone has resaved or altered this copy." He spoke plainly, without flourish. Every head turned. Mediator Rosa leaned in. Mark's face shifted from practiced calm to a flash of anger. For a moment no one spoke. The mediation room held that pause like a held breath. "Rosa, mixed a coal, can you explain the difference?" Ethan lifted his chin. "The dates don't match. The printed page and the file server entries disagree. That suggests the document may not be the original export. I recommend verification." Ethan's voice was firm. Maya felt an odd relief. The fear cracked open into something else. The beginnings of clarity that came from an external check. She needed verification. She needed objective proof. Mark's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing my counsel of forgery?" He snapped. The room jolted into an argument. Rapid back and forth began. "I'm not accusing anyone. Ethan, I'm asking for process. Process is delaying my daughter's life." Mark shot back. "You can seek verification." Rosa replied, "But we must remain civil." Maya's voice broke in. "Mark, say if you produced this. Say if you asked someone to alter it." She named him directly. Her words were short. "Mark, did you alter the files?" She asked again. The exchange went quick. 3 short, sharp responses and counter responses that forced the mediator to call for order. Mark rose as if to move the table toward blame. "You always attack me in front of people," he said. "You make me out to be the villain. You know I work hard. You presented new evidence without notice." Maya replied, "You relied on a shortened note that leaves out facts. Mies. Patel," she wrote from a handout. Neither of those replaced timestamps and logs. Maya refused to let the room's tone slip into nostalgic argument. She anchored her points with documents and time-stamped receipts. Then the peak arrived. Mediator Rosa folded her hands and said, "We need independent verification of the documents. If there is a discrepancy in metadata, we cannot accept them as is. I will order verification, and we will recess to allow both sides to produce originals and server logs for the first time in the meeting." The energy shifted from accusation to procedural consequence. Mark's face flickered. He slumped into his chair with a look that mixed defeat and anger. Maya felt tension fall out of her shoulders, replaced by a draining, watchful relief. The mediator called a short recess. People stood and moved into the corridor with the scrape of chairs and low murmurs. Outside the room, Ethan opened his mouth and said, "You did exactly what you needed in there. You kept the record, you didn't get personal. We'll pull the server logs and the clinic receipts. We'll also ask the school for raw exports." Maya nodded, but she felt worn down. Her throat had dried. She had to breathe deliberately to control the tremor. She let Ethan speak to the plan. The emotion shifted again, clarity consolidating into a focused resolve rather than a shaky confidence. In the courthouse corridor, Mark lingered by the water fountain. He watched Maya and Ethan step out. When Maya passed him, he offered a fragmented apology that sounded like 2 voices in one. "Maya, I'm sorry about the fight. He stopped. His apology did not reach her. Mark, Maya stepping around him, holding her folder against her chest. "I will not accept half-truths. If you want time with her, we will make it safe with clear terms and verified facts." Her words were practical. She did not plead. She did not berate. She stated the conditions like a list of essentials. Mark's face hardened. "You always make it sound like I am a threat," he said. He took a breath as if to push farther, but the corridor's echo swallowed more than he intended. He let his sentence trail into something that could be read as regret or as manipulation. Maya did not respond. She remembered the wedding photograph face down at home. That earlier image had been a private, concrete moment of betrayal. It sat behind her eyes now like a dated receipt. Ethan put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "We start by getting raw server logs and the school's exports," he said. "Then we line up timestamps and clinic receipts. I will call a friend who handles digital forensics. She can verify whether a file was altered. Call Mies Patel and ask for her original notes too," Maya added. She felt the energy of decision settle into action. Her fear had been useful. It had made her gather evidence. Now the feeling that moved her was determination expressed as logistics, phone calls, emails, verifications. They walked toward Ethan's car on the courthouse steps as dusk pulled long shadows across the stone. Maya opened her phone and began typing a list of exactly what she needed. She felt tired, but not broken. The mediator's order to verify documents had given her the short reprieve she needed to change fear into agency. Inside her pocket, she still carried the thin wedding band she wore loosely now. It rested against the edge of her notes as if to remind her why she insisted on clear facts. For their daughter's routine, for her daughter's safety, for the daily truth of small acts. When Ethan started the engine, Mark stayed near the pillar and watched. Maya did not look back. She tapped the first line into her notes and pressed send to Mies Patel. "Please send original school exports and your sign in sheet from May 4th through May 15th. Then she typed another message to the clinic. Can you confirm the timestamp on the receipt for May 14th? She hit send and felt the sound of a small plan set into motion. The mediator had called for verification. The next moves would be about proof. They drove away from the courthouse with a thin band of orange at the horizon. Maya pressed her forehead to the cool glass for a moment and breathed out. She had walked into the mediation with suspicion and watched it become fear, and then watched fear turn into clarity and focused action. She had confronted Mark. She had asked for the evidence. She had not let the conversation become a theater of blame. That practical choice changed the room's outcome. Independent verification, a recess, and a new schedule. Nothing was resolved yet. The legal threat still hung over them. But the chapter that opened in the mediation room had closed with a concrete procedural step. Maya turned to Ethan. We start with server logs and the school's raw exports, she said again. She looked down at her hands, at the folder of receipts and messages. Call your friend for forensics. I'll get the clinic and Ms. Patel's originals, Ethan nodded. His thumb brushed the worn leather satchel at his side. We'll get timestamps. We'll make sure the record is what it says it is. They spoke in concise sentences, planning in the language of lists. That practical dialogue replaced the earlier rush of accusation. As Ethan backed the car onto the street, Mark lingered inside the courthouse and turned his jacket collar up against the evening. He watched Maya leave. His silhouette folded into the pillars dark. In the front seat, Maya sent one more message, and then locked her phone with a decisive thumb press. She slid her remaining folder into the seat beside her. The mediator's words, order verification, recess, sat in her head like instructions. She had a plan and a short window. Maya closed her folder and stood up. She felt the quiet steadiness that comes from shifting toward action. She would collect the raw files. She would ask for clinic receipts. She would call witnesses if necessary. She would not allow the conversation to pivot away from proof. She would not let Mark control the narrative through selective papers. On the courthouse steps, with evening cooling the stone, Maya closed the car door and tapped the first thread of a plan into her notes. The clerk pressed a stamped envelope across the glass and said, "This is ex parte, effective now." Maya's hand tightened on her tote. Suspicion rode up her spine the way cold rain creeps under a collar. She had learned to watch for sudden papers, sudden plans. What does that mean for me? She asked, and the clerk's fingers tapped the stamp as if reading aloud the rule. Within 3 sentences, the courtroom reality landed. Mark's expanded custody claim had been entered, and it began immediately. The concrete problem stood in front of her like a closed door. She had to act now. Maya left the clerk's counter and held the envelope at arm's length. The paper felt thin and ordinary, but the words inside would change. Who picked up her daughter from after school? She thought of the wedding photo she'd found face down at home 2 chapters ago, and the mediation folder that had hit the table with force. Those things were not memories. They were evidence of a pattern, him setting terms and expecting others to follow. Her lips went dry. She folded the envelope open with precise fingers. Maya Alvarez. The clerk called. The name sounded neutral in the fluorescent light. Maya folded the document back and stared at the signature block. Her suspicion shifted into irritation. Who filed this? The clerk named Mark Spencer's attorney. Maya's jaw tightened. She had not been warned. She had not been given time to prepare. She stepped into the courthouse corridor and found Mark and his attorney already standing near the elevators. Mark's shoulders were steady. He wore the navy blazer she remembered from the wedding album, polished leather shoes, an expensive watch visible when he lifted a hand. He looked at the envelope in her hand and smiled with that practiced warmth. Mark, this is for the stability of our child. You know how the courts work." His voice was measured. Maya heard the words she had heard in mediation. The legal phrasing that could be used like a shield. Ethan reached her side before she could answer. He had come straight from his evening shift at the community workshop, sleeves rolled, a satchel slung over his shoulder, and he did not try to hide irritation. "Mark, Ethan, you can do this out of the blue." "You was nothing." His hand rested lightly on Maya's elbow. He did not let go. Mark's attorney cleared her throat. Mr. Spencer filed due process steps. The clerk processed a temporary order. The attorney's voice was steady, official. Maya's suspicion slid into anger. She heard it in how her reply came out clipped. "You filed this today, and you expect me to hand over my daughter tonight?" she asked. She Mark's name like a challenge. Mark's expression flickered. "It's a temporary arrangement, Maya. Nothing permanent yet." He kept his distance. Ethan stepped in, temporary or not. "You served this without warning." "Why, Mark?" "Ethan." His baritone was low and plain. The corridor collected people. Phones opened. A receptionist looked up. Mark's voice sharpened. "Ethan, this is between us and the court. Please step back." The line snapped with the kind of tension that draws an audience. Maya felt the corridor tightening with murmurs. A bystander cleared their throat. Someone whispered, "Is that the custody case?" Maya put the envelope in her bag and pulled the strap tighter. They did not wait for conclusion. At the community center after school room, the staff had already received a copy of the order. Maya arrived with Ethan 2 minutes later and found the administrator holding a printed page. The woman folded the order along its creases like a script she had been told to read. "I'm sorry, Ms. Alvarez," the administrator said, voice flat with procedure. "We've been served. We must follow the directive until it is verified otherwise." Maya felt the word follow land like an instruction to a machine. Her emotion shifted again. Irritation moved into clear urgency. She crouched to her daughter's level and said, "Come with me, please." Her daughter looked up and blinked. The child's small face held confusion more than fear. Ethan put one hand on the girl's shoulder and the other out, palm flat, to show the staff they were calm and not resisting. "We're working on this," he said. "Please, let her go with us. We'll have counsel on this immediately." The administrator's eyes flicked to the legal line at the top of the sheet and back to Ethan's open palm. Someone at the back of the room said, "Sir, we were told to follow the order." The school's voice carried the weight of policy. Maya felt a hot bloom under her skin. What am I supposed to do now?" The question demanded an answer that the administrator could not give. They left the community center with the child in Maya's arms only because the school director called a supervisor, and the supervisor made a judgment call after a phone consultation. Outside, Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets and counted off tasks under his breath. "We need a lawyer who will move fast," he said. "Claire can look at this tonight. I will drive you to her office." Maya nodded once and set her jaw. The urgency welded into action. At the small law office, Claire cleared a space on the desk and unfolded the paperwork. Her office smelled of old coffee and legal pads. She turned pages with a steady thumb. "This affidavit bears a timestamp that doesn't match the date the signature line indicates." Claire, after a long look, she tapped the timestamp with the tip of a pen. Evidence that shouldn't add up shifted suspicion into something sharper. "The idea of forgery?" Maya's mouth opened. "Forge?" she asked. The word left as if it might be wrong to say aloud. Ethan leaned over the desk, shoulders forward. "Claire, you mean someone altered that?" he asked. Claire set down the pens and met their eyes. "I mean this version's electronic metadata shows changes. We need forensic verification. If that line is inaccurate, it undermines the temporary order's basis." Claire spoke like someone laying out a path. Maya blinked. Her suspicion poured into a thin band of cold fear. The immediate risk to custody had become not only procedural but possibly criminal. She folded her hands until her knuckles went white. They moved quickly. Claire called a contact at the county records office. She explained the discrepancy, then said, "We will need evidence of who filed the document and when the affidavit was created." She Maya for every paper and every email she had relating to the custody discussions. Maya gave Claire the folder with mediation notes and the photograph she had found face down. Each item slid across Claire's desk with a sound like small stones. A sudden knock at the office door broke the brief lull. A young man stood in the doorway, breathless. "Officer Ramirez is outside." There's been an altercation at the community center parking lot. The knock echoed like an alarm. Maya and Ethan rose at once. They reached the parking lot under sodium lights. Mark was there, a dark shape near his car, palms up, a child's backpack between them. Bystanders had gathered in loose circles. Mark's voice pushed through the hum. "I have the order," he said. "I am following the court's directive." His jaw worked. Ethan's face was a study in restraint. Maya stepped forward. "Give me back the backpack," she said. Her voice did not shake. Mark moved toward the car and reached for the bag with a swift motion that had echoes of old possessive gestures. Maya's breath hitched. The motion shifted the scene instantaneously from argument to physicality. Mark's fingers closed on the handle. "This is mine to take now," he said. "The paperwork is clear." His tone was clipped. Maya put a hand between his and the bag. "No," she said. "You do not take my daughter's bag like this." She Mark's name twice in a way that contained both accusation and a demand. Ethan stepped in beside her, placing himself half a step between Mark and the child. Mark pushed. The shove was small but hard enough to make Maya stagger. A woman at the curb shouted, "Hey!" Phones lifted. The shove registered in every face. Maya's stomach dropped into a thin, cold place and then inflated into fierce protective clarity. Her fear snapped into defiant action. She set her feet and put both hands on the backpack. "You will not take her," she said. Her voice had a single-note determination. Ethan's hand went to Mark's wrist. "Mark, stop." Ethan the name like a command. Mark jerked his arm away and tried to pull the bag. There was a quick back and forth. "Let go." "Ethan, get away." Mark replied. "You can just." Ethan began. "The order says." Mark cut in. "The order might be forged." Claire shouted from the doorway, having raced over with Officer Ramirez behind her. Her voice broke through like a bell. Officer Ramirez moved forward, uniformed and efficient, and raised a hand for calm. "Everyone take a step back." "Officer Ramirez, I need statements." "Claire, you said there's a document issue." Claire handed the officer a copy and pointed out the timestamp. Ramirez read and then radioed dispatch. The officer turned to Mark. "Sir, do you understand why we here?" "Officer Ramirez, we are separating parties and taking statements. No one is to remove the child tonight until we verify the paperwork." The officer's voice was clear and procedural. Mark's jaw tightened. He glanced at the crowd. An onlooker recorded the exchange on a phone and said, "He's trying to take her bag." The clip would be quick and hard, edged. Maya felt the crowd's attention press against her shoulder. She had both relief and an ache. Relief because authorities had intervened, ache because this fight had become public, a display of private danger. Officer Ramirez took Claire's note and said he would deliver it to records for verification. Maya and Ethan to wait while he took statements. Maya stood with her daughter close and felt Ethan's hand rest on her shoulder. She did not lean into him. She needed a plan more than comfort. At a diner a block from the center, under cheap warm light, Maya signed power of attorney forms that handed immediate authority to Claire to seek forensic verification and to file emergency objections. The pen hovered only a moment over the signature line. Maya wrote her name in a clean hand. Her hands did not tremble. The signature was a decision in ink. Ethan watched her sign. "Maya, this is the right move," he said. Her full name with plain certainty. Claire folded the papers and set them into a manila folder. "We contact the county, get the metadata logs, and file a motion to vacate the temporary order if the affidavit is altered," she said. "We also ask for a protective order until the court hears the verification." Claire's plan was a map. Maya's emotion shifted one last time. The panic that had arrived with the envelope and become fear and anger now bivelled into determined calm. She pressed the pen to the forms and did not look away. She felt the weight of an action taken, The decision was not a grand speech. It was a single concrete act. Transfer authority to an attorney who could move faster than she could alone. Ethan folded his hands and spoke softly. "I'll stay with you tonight. I'll notify your neighbor and be on call for the school." He each thing plainly. Maya nodded. She thought of her daughter asleep later that night, and whether she would wake to someone different at her door. The doubt cut through, but she kept her face blank. Claire added, "We also subpoena the phone records and courier logs. If the timestamp is wrong, we need to show chain of custody breaks." She looked at Maya and then at Ethan. "We start the forensic clock tonight. If we move quickly, we can take this to a judge and get a hearing within days." Her tone had the efficiency of a person used to pushing paperwork into action. Outside the diner, Mark's car idled under a streetlight. He spoke into his phone in clipped sentences. Maya watched him through the window. She counted the breaths between his words. He spoke Mark Spencer's name often, as if naming himself reinforced his right. She had no illusion of an easy fix. She had only the process now: evidence, witnesses, paperwork. The legal machine would grind, and Claire had just put oil into its gears. At the last table, Officer Ramirez called to say he had taken statements and would deliver Claire's notes to records at first light. He sounded practical. "We want to remove the child tonight," he said. "I'll make sure the community center knows to call me if anyone tries to move her." Maya repeated the officer's name to anchor it in memory. "Officer Ramirez," she said. She kept her voice steady. As they left the diner, Maya slid the manila folder into her bag. Her daughter tucked a drawing into the folder without being asked. The little paper slipped between the legal forms like a quiet claim. Maya folded the drawing into her palm. It steadied her. They walked to their cars under a desert sky that still wore sunset gold along the horizon. Maya opened her door and paused with the bag on her lap. She felt raw and small and capable all at once. Claire had the power of attorney. The officer had the note. Ethan had promised to be present. Those were discrete facts, not poetic comforts. They were tools. Maya started the engine. She heard daughter's name and watched the child curl into the booster seat and pull a blanket up to her chin. Maya heard herself say, "We'll get this fixed." The sentence was not a vow to the universe. It was a plan she would execute with Claire and Ethan. She turned the car toward home. At the driveway, Maya set the folder on the kitchen counter and watched the photograph she had found face down months ago, propped against the spice rack. The picture showed Mark and herself at a wedding reception, smiling for the camera. Now it rested on a counter with the edges showing. The evidence of that night had already been set aside once. She picked it up and turned it face up. Her decision to sign the power of attorney and move for forensic verification closed this chapter's immediate conflict. It did not end the argument with Mark. It did not erase the night he had set the order in motion. It did carve out a legal route forward, concrete and procedural. Claire would call the county records team in the morning. Officer Ramirez would follow up. Ethan would be at pickup at 6:45. Maya placed the signed folder into a locked drawer and shut it. The sound of the latch closing was small and definitive. She stood in the plain kitchen with her daughter coloring at the table, and thought of the court table that had been slammed in earlier mediation, of the manila folder that had landed with force in that room. She would not let that momentum push her aside again. She kissed her daughter's head, and the child hummed without looking up. "Maya, good night, sweetheart," the child's voice mumbled. "Night, Mama." She turned off the kitchen light and left the folder's weight on the drawer. That solitary action, sliding paper into Claire's hands, shifted the fight from an isolated moment of fear into a case with witnesses, documents, and procedure. It was not complete victory. It was a concrete, legal step. The final sound of the chapter is the pen placed into Claire's folder and the quick, decisive click of a lock. Claire would start the forensic clock in the morning. Maya would be awake to take the next call. She had no flourish, only steps to follow. She placed the signed power of attorney into her bag, closed it, and looked once more at the photograph on the counter before she switched off the kitchen light. The light went out. The house rearranged itself around the small, firm actions she'd taken tonight. A courier ran up the courthouse steps and slammed a stamped envelope onto the bench between Maya and Mark. Suspicion tightened Maya's jaw when she saw Mark's hand close around the papers. Ethan moved in front of her daughter without thinking. A clerk's voice called across the stone. "That's an ex-parte emergency motion. It will be heard this morning." The central problem stood in plain sight. Someone wanted custody changed immediately. Maya's mouth went dry. She thought of the folded wedding photo she'd found weeks earlier and of the papers Mark had dropped at the school pickup. The suspicion that had lived in the back of her head hardened into a decision. She would not let this paperwork take her child away. Maya pulled the strap of her tote tighter. She breathed with a measured pace and kept her fingers around her daughter's small hand. She had been divorced for months, but practical things kept falling onto her like stacked mail. Custody calendars, calls from school, an unpaid bill she had to sort. Her life had narrowed into lists and schedules. Today it felt like someone had tried to rip the lines out of that calendar. "Ethan Myatt, let me talk to the clerk." His hand brushed hers. Her name like an anchor. Maya nodded and let him go. Inside the courthouse foyer, Mark raised his voice when the clerk read the motion's cover. "This is necessary," he said. He kept his composure as if it were a script. Maya's first feeling was a sharp, tightened watchfulness. She spoke next, slow and precise. "What grounds are you claiming, Mark?" Her voice did not wobble, but her fingers tucked hair behind her ear. Mark looked at the envelope, then at the clerk. "New information. The child's well-being needs review immediately," he said. The clerk pushed a stack of forms toward Maya. "If you have evidence to file in response, we need it now. I can reopen the docket, but it will delay the morning schedule." The clock on the wall read early morning. The procedural scramble began. A manila folder slid from Mark's briefcase. He set it on the counter with a deliberate motion. Ethan intercepted his eyes. "We will need time, Judge. We will file counter evidence now." Ethan's voice was firm. "Give me 10 minutes at the clerk's window." The clerk flicked a pen and motioned to a waiting line. Maya felt fear rise under the careful watchfulness. Her hands went cold. She looked at her daughter. The little girl tugged at Maya's sleeve and asked, "Mama, will they take me away?" Maya knelt, folding herself into a smaller shape to meet that question. "No. I'm not going to let that happen." The words left her mouth without flourish. They were a decision, not a promise born of hope. Outside the waiting area, a woman in a worn cardigan approached with a folded affidavit in her hands. "I'm the volunteer caregiver who watched Luna last month," she said to Maya and Ethan. She set the papers on the table. He missed his scheduled visits and left her once in the parking lot while he ran in for coffee. The voice was steady. Ethan took the affidavit and scanned a paragraph. A new turn arrived, a witness who put dates and times on Mark's absences. Maya's suspicion shifted to a cautious determination. She focused on the paper. The physical words felt real against her thumb. When exactly did this happen? Mark demanded, stepping forward. His gestures were quick. "That's not accurate." He jabbed a finger at the affidavit. Ethan and Maya both named dates from the school calendar. "You were at a business dinner on that date." Mark, "Ethan, we have a receipt showing you left early that night." Mark's expression tightened. "You can just make claims without proof," he said. His tone sharpened. The lobby filled with a charged hush. A court clerk looked up from her window. "We can accept affidavit statements, but for an emergency motion we need supportive documentation. Photographs, messages, appointment logs. File anything you have now." Ethan's reaction was immediate. He moved toward the clerk's window and asked for copies of the motion. "I need to file counter evidence," he told the clerk. The words with the focus of someone assembling a small, urgent toolkit. Ethan took out a worn leather satchel and pulled a small stack of photos and emails. He had prepared for the possibility that Mark would escalate, and that preparation arrived like a tool. Ethan ran down the hall to Maya's car. He came back with a high school teacher's email printout and a calendar with marked appointments. The teacher's note read that Mark had missed a supervised pickup once and shown up late another time. The evidence layered. Maya watched him move, noting the steady way he folded the papers and the small dimple that showed when he caught her eye. Suspicion softened into a brittle fear. She feared the legal system's speed. She also felt something else, the steady presence of a man who would gather facts rather than promises. The judge called the emergency hearing to order in a small courtroom that smelled like tunner and lemon cleaning solution. The clerk read the motion aloud. Mark rose and spoke with practiced ease. Your Honor, circumstances have changed. I'm asking for expanded custody to protect our child. His eyes flicked to Maya. Ethan stepped forward with a file. Maya sat where the judge could see her face. She concentrated on measured answers and avoided letting anger dictate the shape of her voice. The questioning started tight and procedural. Ms. Alvarez, describe your daily routine with Luna. The judge's question was spare. Maya spoke in short, clear sentences. School drop-off at 8, after school pickup at 3, pediatric appointments on first Tuesdays. She offered teacher contact names and her work schedule. She described phone messages she had kept and a photo of a doctor's visit. Her voice sounded small in the courtroom, but the details did the work of a person constructing a pattern the judge could read. Mark rose when the judge turned to him. My work is demanding, he said. I have a flexible schedule to provide for her. I can offer more time. The judge leaned forward and asked for specifics. Mark cited vague business trips and travel obligations. His answers lacked dates. Ethan and Maya exchanged a look. Fear shifted. First it had felt like a threat, then like a test they could meet with facts. Ethan handed the clerk a file of photos showing Luna at school events during times Mark claimed to be present. The clerk thumbed through the stack and nodded. Then an unexpected witness arrived. The temporary caregiver who had signed the affidavit took the stand. She placed a small calendar on the table and tapped 3 dates. On these days he missed visits and left Luna unsupervised while running errands, she said. Her voice did not waver. I wrote the times on this calendar because I was worried. Mark flinched as the caregiver read a text chain that showed him promising arrival times and then apologizing for being late. The caregiver's testimony put concrete times next to his excuses. The hearing tightened. Maya watched Mark's jaw clench. He tried to reframe the facts. There were miscommunications, he said. I never meant to leave her alone. Ethan leaned forward. Mark, you promised the school you'd be on time on November 9th. You sent this message at 2:20 p.m. instead of arriving at 1:30. We have photos from 1:45 p.m. of Luna on the bench waiting. Ethan's lines came quick. Mark snapped back with 3 rapid replies of his own. That's not true. I was there. I had a meeting. I told you. The exchange moved like a compact argument. The judge watched the papers and the witness. Midway through the testimony, a new document arrived at the clerk's window. A teacher's email printed with a timestamp showing Mark had been absent from a scheduled classroom helper shift while claiming he had supervised Luna. The courtroom shivered with a small, sudden change. The mid-chapter cliffhanger arrived when the bailiff announced, "This email indicates he was at a restaurant when he said he was supervising the child," for a breath. The room held only the sound of chairs shifting. Maya felt her pulse thump in the same quick rhythm as that silence. She did not let herself imagine outcomes. She counted to 3 slow times and returned to the facts. The climax built when the teacher took the stand and recited exact times. She described a morning when Mark had called to say he was taking Luna to a school activity and then sent a brief text later that day apologizing for missing it. I marked attendance. Luna was present, But her father did not sign out with us. The teacher's words placed Mark's absences into the school's official record. Ethan presented a photograph taken on a neighborhood street that showed Mark's car across town at the time he claimed to be at an appointment. The combination of witness testimony and documentary proof compressed the space for Mark's narrative. Mark rose again. He tried to shift blame onto scheduling confusion and work pressures. "I was under strain," he said. "I wanted more time with our daughter." The judge asked for specifics, and the court docket showed the caregiver's affidavit and the teacher's email. The evidence undercut his sudden emergency motion. Maya's suspicion changed to a cautious relief during those moments when paperwork and testimony aligned. She did not smile. She inhaled and exhaled in short, controlled breaths. When the judge issued the ruling, the courtroom was quiet enough that the creak of chairs registered. "I will maintain custody with Memes. Alvarez," the judge said, "visitation for Mr. Spencer will be clarified, monitored, and require proof of attendance. Counseling and supervised contact are ordered." Mark's face flushed and then hardened. He left the bench without striking the judge's gavel. Ethan reached for Maya's hand under the seat, and she felt the warmth of his palm against her knuckles. Relief came like a loosened knot. After the ruling, outside under the desert sun, Maya watched her daughter run across the courthouse steps. The little girl laughed and her ponytail swung. Maya slid a finger over the thin wedding band she had been wearing loosely since the divorce. She let the band move toward the pad of her thumb and then tucked it inside her tote. The motion was small. It was a choice. Ethan stood beside her with a paper cup of something warm and handed it to her without needing to speak. "You did well," Maya answered. "We did this together." Her voice contained both gratitude and a careful reserve. Mark's profile passed them in the courtyard. He did not make a move toward them. He kept his distance and his face registered a set of tight lines. Without turning, "This isn't over," Ethan replied. "Steady. We will do what's right for Luna." The exchange ended there. Maya watched Mark's footsteps recede across the pavement. A practical, concrete resolution had arrived from the judge that did not erase the past, but it altered the immediate risk. That evening, Maya sat on her porch while the light turned golden along the desert lane. Her daughter sprawled on the steps with a sketch pad. Maya thumbed an envelope she had been handed earlier, the court order on the custody agreement. She read the specific requirements: monitored visitation, mandatory counseling sessions for Mark, and scheduled check-ins with the teacher. The language was precise and limited. She felt guarded hope. The hope came not as a slogan but as decisions. A counselor's number, a supervised calendar, a plan to call the school if lines blurred. She folded the court paper into the bag with the loosened wedding band and set the bag beside her. Ethan did not demand a timeline. He walked her daughter to the gate and placed his hand on the little girl's shoulder. "I'll pick up some extra snacks for tomorrow's school party," he said. The daughter looked at him and grinned. "Thanks, Mr. Cole," she said. Ethan's voice had a soft baritone as always. He crouched and addressed the girl. "See you at 3. The exchange was ordinary and human. Maya watched and felt both relief and a careful reserve. Her decisions would be measured from now on. That night inside the kitchen, Maya made a list. She wrote down counselor phone numbers, school contacts, and the dates required by the judge. She did not write move on or start over. She wrote actions she could take. Call the counselor on Monday, schedule a parent-teacher check-in, confirm supervised visits in writing. Each line was a small step. Each step was a choice that prioritized Luna's routine and steady care. Maya folded the list and put it in the front pocket of her tote next to the court order and the wedding band. Before she closed the door, Ethan stepped into the hallway with a takeaway container and a calm look. "You don't have to do this alone." Maya looked at him and answered, "I know." "Thank you, Ethan." He reached for her hand and hesitated, then let his palm rest lightly on her knuckles. He did not rush her. The gesture was patient and exact. Maya felt an emotion shift from guarded relief to a cautious warmth. She let herself accept the small comfort without imagining a future beyond the concrete choices in front of her. The next morning at school, Maya watched her daughter line up under the teacher's watchful eye. The teacher nodded at Maya and mouthed a brief, practical instruction about pickup logistics. Maya mouthed it back. Later at home, she opened the tote and slid the wedding band into the zipped-inside pocket for safekeeping. She put the court order on the kitchen counter and placed a calendar beside it with the visitation schedule written in block letters. She called the counselor and left a message requesting the earliest available appointment. Each action felt like assembling a life by pieces, not by hopeful slogans. Over the next weeks, Mark requested supervised visitation 3 times. Each time the school verified the schedule and the caregiver attended. When he missed one session and showed up late for another, the school emailed the judge as required. The pattern that had once been a tangle of excuses and unkept promises now had a record. Maya responded with phone calls and calendar entries. She did not gloat. She kept to the facts and to Luna's needs. Ethan continued to bring small, practical things. A basket of groceries the day she worked late, a note from the teacher after a parent meeting that praised Luna's drawing. His presence remained a steady, respectful offering rather than a demand. At a parenting meeting called by the counselor, Maya sat in a small circle with Mark and the assigned mediator. The counselor asked them to list specific caregiving tasks. Mark wrote a few items and then hesitated before promising to attend counseling sessions. The counselor asked for actual dates. Mark committed to attending twice a month. He used his full name as if recording it made behavior more concrete. The counselor checked the calendar and confirmed the dates. That grounded step shifted some of Maya's lingering mistrust into an observation. Mark had to match words with appointments now. The final emotional turn came when Ethan brought Luna to a small public festival on an afternoon that was not scheduled as a visitation. He bought 2 tickets for a face painting booth and waited in a short line. Luna leaned into Ethan and said, "Cole, you stayed when I was nervous," he answered. "I will stay when you need me to." The line of ordinary things, the face paint, the cotton candy stick, the warm sun did not erase the past. It showed Maya a life that included predictable, compassionate people. She felt a cautious, plain hope settle into actions. Calling the counselor, confirming the supervised visits, taking Luna to piano lessons on Saturdays. Weeks later, on a late afternoon when the sky turned warm, Mark called and asked to speak. Maya agreed to meet him at the courthouse, in the administrative office where formal words could be recorded. He handed over paperwork showing he had scheduled counseling sessions and proof of employment travel that matched some of the dates. He did not ask for immediate changes to the order. "I've started the sessions." Maya listened and said nothing that would promise anything beyond verification. She replied, "Then show the records at the next review." The exchange was concrete and small. It was a boundary set in a place where paper and signatures mattered. When the judge scheduled a review 6 months later, the records showed attendance, partial improvement, and continued monitoring. The judge noted the school's reports and the caregiver's statements. The legal danger that had arrived in the morning as a stamped envelope had been answered by dates, emails, teacher notes, and witness testimony. The immediate threat receded because the system now had concrete entries to read. Maya closed one chapter within the legal calendar and opened another in a list of errands. Counseling appointments, school plays, doctor visits. On the day Maya decided to call a friend and accept an invitation out for coffee, she found that the small choices had become the form of her life. She did not make grand promises to herself. She bought a ticket to a community pottery class with Luna. She put the calendar in a visible place. She left the wedding band inside the tote where she could take it out once if she needed to. Ethan walked her to the door and did not ask for more than she could give. If you need me, I am there, Maya. Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate that. She closed the door with the practical click of a lock. The decisive thing she had learned in this chapter was not a phrase, but a set of actions. Documentation, steady presence, and clear boundaries. Outside the courthouse steps, that morning when the emergency motion arrived, Maya had felt suspicion sharpen into action. By the time she tacked the visitation schedule on the refrigerator, that suspicion had shifted through fear and relief into guarded hope. The legal order had created immediate safety. The work of repair and of trust would be longer and more precise. Ethan walked with them as they left the courthouse yard. Maya slipped the loosened ring into her bag, took her daughter's hand, and stepped away from the courthouse steps with Ethan at her side.